The leaders in North Carolina fighting against the restrictions. Reverend, thanks for joining us. Well, so let me ask you about the argument that's being put forward here by Governor McCrory, by the state of North Carolina. They say, look, it is too late right now. It's too close to the 2016 election, to the November election, to change what we had planned, what we had been preparing for. What do you say to that?
Well, first of all, the governor is the one who's confused. He has a bad case of Trumpitis, and that is doing something wrong and then blaming other people for the consequences. They waited more than 17 days to file this. It is not too late. It will not create confusion. What has been confusing to historians and to us in the civil rights community is why would a governor in the legislature in the 21st century engage in intentional racism unless they believe they cannot make their case in the public square? And they weren't just caught one time. They were caught twice. Last week, a few weeks ago, the federal court said there was intentional racism in the voter suppression case. And then a unanimous panel came back again and said intentional racism in the way in which they gerrymandered the redistricting and engaged in creating what we call apartheid districts. So this is twice. The courts are not confused. Only Mr. McCrory is confused. And we always have time to do things that are right.
Let me ask you a bottom line political question, because a lot of eyes nationally are on North Carolina. We've seen polls there showing a close race, some even putting Hillary Clinton ahead. There's a big Senate race. There's a big governor's race. They're expected to be close. The difference between having these restrictions on the books and in force this November and not, what does that mean in terms of numbers of participation, do you think?
Yeah, it is incredibly important. These laws that were put into place were to deal with the vestiges of the restrictions that had been in place. And we had moved in North Carolina to being the fourth highest per capita increase. 70% of African Americans have begun to vote. Remember, the way that they passed this voter suppression law, they actually looked at what African Americans were using, and as the court says, surgically decided to remove them. Now he's talking about he wants the Supreme Court to join him in wrong, uphold the photo ID, take away 17 days of early voting, and even restrict the registration of 16 and 17-year-olds. We know that this can have tremendous impact. And when we hear whether it's McCrory or Trump saying things like certain communities will cheat, that's just coded race language, what we call Southern strategy language that's being used. This is about percentages. He knows it. The legislators know it. And what they're simply trying to do is rig the election. They got caught red-handed. And now, rather than repent and say he was wrong, he's acting more like, Governor Maddox out of Georgia back in the 60s, who called even the Voting Rights Act wrong, unconstitutional, and immoral. What is immoral is any governor that would try to suppress the right to vote and do it in a racist and unconstitutional way.
We mentioned there are a number of states that have new laws, new restrictions on the books heading into this election. There was that Supreme Court ruling in 2013 that effectively did away with portions of the Voting Rights Act, made it easier for a lot of these states to do this. Are you looking at what's playing out right now in the courts of North Carolina to be a turning point in that broader fight?
I think it is a major turning point when you look at what our state conference are doing, the other ones, because 2013 was the Shelby decision. That was the worst rollback of the Voting Rights Act since 1965. After Shelby, you had a great number, a deluge of these voter suppression tactics, and in North Carolina, the worst that we had not seen since the Voting Rights Act, since the days of Jim Crow. Those persons that want to suppress the vote understand that if you break up the South, if you can break the solid South, you can fundamentally shift American politics. I often say that in the South, the former Confederate states, 11 states, that's 22 Senate seats in U.S. Senate, 31% of the U.S. House, and nearly 160 electoral votes. So if you can control the South, you can in some ways control the nation. They also know that if you register 30% of African American voters in the South and they vote, and you join with progressive whites and Latinos, you have a fundamentally new demographic. This is nothing more than an attempt by James Crow Esquire in the present to suppress the vote and try to hold on to the solid South. But the courts are beginning to come around, history is shifting, and the South is changing, and as it does, the nation will change.
All right, Reverend William Barber, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.